What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for Game Week 4. So I'm going to go through some of the popular players being moved in and out of people's teams and give my opinion on whether they are good moves or not. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to check out Fantasy Football Hub for your AI suggested transfers using the links in the description below. More on that to come later. All right, let's start with Bukayo Saka, who's had over 300,000 transfers out already this week. And I suspect a lot of those transfers are just moving him to Mo Salah. And if you're doing that for free, that just looks like a really good move. Like Arsenal have got Spurs away and City away in 4 and 5. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't mind playing Saka against Spurs. It's not that bad of a fixture. But obviously Salah's got back-to-back home games. Forest at home, followed by Bournemouth at home. And he's been great so far this season. And a lot of people just don't want to go without him. So if you're doing Saka to Salah for free, great move. If it's for a hit, I like it less so, especially if you've already got Haaland, because he's a perfectly good captain in Game Week 4, and you only really need Salah for captaincy in Game Week 5, but I still understand why people might want to take a 4-point hit to get Salah in just because of how good he's been so far. Like one combination I've seen quite a lot is Saka and Isak to Salah and João Pedro. I really like that for Game Weeks 4 and 5, as long as João Pedro is going to be back and available from international duty, which I think he will be. And if he keeps his place long term, even though Brighton's fixtures turn after Game Week 5, he's still going to be really good value. The one thing to keep in mind is Game Week 6 and 7 for Arsenal. You've got Leicester at home and Southampton at home, followed by Bournemouth away. You are probably going to want Saka, no matter whether you've got Salah and Haaland or whatever your structure is. You're going to want him back in. So just think about how you're going to do that. For some people, it might be wildcard. For some people, it could be free transfers. Either way, he's going to be popular and it's going to be difficult to go without him. We did see last night for Norway that Odegaard went off injured and he could be out for a few weeks for Arsenal. We'll have to wait for confirmation on that. That would weaken Arsenal for sure, but not so much that I would just ignore Saka for that little fixture run 6 to 8. So just keep that in mind. If you're just coming off Saka in one move to a different player, I'm not sure there's many that warrant using a free transfer in Game Week 4. Some people might be looking to go to Cole Palmer, which I don't hate, and he didn't go away on international duty with England, but he's been seen training with Chelsea, so I'm sure he's fine. And look, Chelsea's fixtures in 4 and 5 are better. Bournemouth away and West Ham away versus Spurs away and City away for Arsenal. But I think in Game Week 4 in particular, is Bournemouth away that much better than Spurs? I'm not sure it is, and I guess similar to what I said in Game Week 3, I'd probably rather just keep Saka and save the transfer and just see if the landscape changes Game Week 5 onwards. And you just might have a bit more info and might want to use that free transfer in a different way. And look, Cole Palmer doesn't suddenly become bad after Game Week 5. Of course not, right? It's Brighton at home and Forest at home. But that is not as good as Leicester at home and Southampton at home, which is what Arsenal have. So I think outside of just dodging that Man City fixture in Game Week 5, I'm not sure it's worth going to Palmer just to go back again. Again, if it's a short-term move for 4 and 5, then you're going to wildcard. That might work out okay. But I think if I'm keeping one player 4 to 7, I think I'd probably rather just keep Saka, even though he's got that City fixture. I'd rather just not spend the transfers kind of messing about with it. And I'm sure there's other kind of players that people are thinking about. Maybe there's a downgrade somewhere that you want to use the money for a future week to go and get Salah in. But I'm not a fan of downgrading a player for money for another transfer unless I'm using it that week. So Saka and Isak to João Pedro and Salah, fine. If it's like Saka to Minter this week, to then use that money next week for a different move, again, I'd rather just save the transfer and something else might have happened where that transfer could be better used. So there's no reason to rush Saka out before Spurs, but if you're going to get Salah or maybe even Palmer, I get it. If you're not too sure about what transfers to make for your team or you just want a second opinion, make sure to check out the AI transfer suggestions on Fantasy Football Hub. So I'm in the My Team tool now, and if I click AI transfers at the top, that will suggest a few different moves for me. So for my team, it's actually recommending that I just bank the free transfer this week, but it does give me an alternative option as well, which is to sell Pedro Porro for Robertson. And you can see from the graph on the right that I would be expected to get more points, but the AI thinks that I'd be better off just saving that transfer, probably because there's more interesting things that I could do in the future instead. So it's quite nice to kind of get that second opinion if you're not sure what to do with your team. And just in general, the My Team tool is really handy to use over the course of the season. Automatically, it will show you all your players' next 3 game weeks fixtures plus their points predictions as well. So you get an idea of when you might have to move players on. You can also change that to single game weeks if you prefer, and just look through the team to see how it's going to look over the next few game weeks and start to plan your transfers. It will also show you, if you click the tab at the top, your price changes as well. So when your players are looking to go up or down in price, which can be quite handy. So that, plus the AI suggested transfers and all the other tools you've got over on Fantasy Football Hub, would help you do better at FPL. And if you sign up today, there is 50% off on annual memberships. But if you just want to try it for a month, maybe you're on Wildcard at the moment, you can sign up monthly as well and just see how you get on. Links in the description below. Check it out today. So as I've already mentioned him, let's talk about Isak next. And I think similar to Saka, for those FPL managers with 2 free transfers, it might make sense to sell him, right? Especially if you're downgrading to fund another move like Salah, or it could be for Cole Palmer. Whoever it is, that might make sense for your team. But if you've only got 1 free transfer, there's less need to get rid of him. I certainly wouldn't be looking at my squad thinking Isak has to go at all costs, because there's this feeling going around that Isak hasn't been great. And I think he and Newcastle probably haven't played to the standard that we've come to expect. But Isak still walked away with a goal and assist in the first 3 matches. He's at 5.3 points per game. It's not that bad. And Wolves away, Fulham away next 2 are the kind of fixtures where he might turn that around and do even better. So there's not many players I would probably sell Isak for with just 1 transfer. Possibly to João Pedro. You could make a case that with Ipswich at home, and I think it's Forest at home. Let me just double check. Yes, it is in 4 and 5. That João Pedro could be a better option. But again, is that worth it in 1 move just to get funds for future weeks? I'm not so sure. The other player that I'm sure people are still thinking about is Watkins. And I spoke about this in Game Week 3, how I wouldn't make the move. I'd wait until Game Week 4. At the moment, Watkins is yellow flagged. I think he'll be fine for Game Week 4. I think Unai Emery will clear him and say he's available. And look, on paper, Everton at home, Wolves at home, Ipswich away, next 3 is definitely better than what Newcastle have. There's no need to pretend otherwise. I still just slightly worry about Watkins given what we've seen so far. Like, he hasn't made it past 70 minutes yet. He's not gone away and played with England either. And they've got Champions League between Game Weeks 4 and 5. So even if his minutes increase for Everton, it's probably not going to be like 90 minutes. I think that's almost unlikely at this stage. I just don't see it happening. Could he get to like 80 minutes? Possibly. But it might be like 70, 75 and then Duran comes on again. So, again, if I was free hitting this week, I would choose Watkins over Isak because of the fixture. But I'd almost want to see what happens with Champions League before I make that move. So if I had Isak and the money in the bank, which I actually do, to be fair, and I can make that move in 1, I still think I would choose to keep Isak and just roll the transfer and just get some more information from Aston Villa. And I appreciate I'm kind of repeating myself a lot over the last couple of weeks that save the transfer, get more info. And you can't do that forever, I understand. But I think with Watkins, there are doubts there. Slight ones, right? And I'm sure Unai Emery, like I said, is he's fine. And Everton at home is good. But I think I'd wait 1 more week and just see if he gets good minutes and then plays in the Champions League and then is available again for Wolves. Maybe you make the move then. But I think Isak is just great. And he's cheaper as well. And he's guaranteed to be on penalties and his minutes look better. I just don't know if there's a need to make that move. If I was on wildcard, maybe I'd choose Watkins over Isak. I'm not sure I'd do it in 1 free transfer. Let me know if you're thinking about doing it in the comments below. Maybe I've got it wrong, but I just don't think I'd do it. So Diogo Jota has started to see some transfers out, over 250,000 already this week. And I find it a little bit surprising. He was quiet against Man United, especially compared to the likes of Diaz and Salah. And perhaps moving forward, they are the 2 Liverpool attackers to go for. But if you already own Jota, I can't see any reason to get rid of him. Forest at home, Bournemouth at home, 2 good fixtures. He's continuing to start as the number 9. Will that last forever? Possibly not. Champions League is kicking up between Game Weeks 4 and 5. Maybe Darwin Nunez comes in at some point. But Liverpool are playing so well, and Jota has been a part of that. I don't see him getting dropped just yet. And so I would just keep hold of him. There's no other player, I don't think, in that price bracket or below that I would want to sell him to this week. I wouldn't even make the sideways move of going to someone like Diaz. Now, if you're on wildcard, I get it. Because if you're going 3 Liverpool, most people are going to go Salah, Trent, and then one of Robertson or Diaz. And I think that's fine. If you're wildcarding and dropping Jota, fair enough. But for everyone else, it just feels like a really easy hold. All right, let's talk about Lucas Digne next. And I say that with a smile on my face because this is one of those players where there's almost universal consensus within the FPL community that you should just never buy him and that he's an FPL troll. And that even if he's looked good and the fixtures coming up are decent, if you put him in your team, it will go wrong. either he'll lose his place, he'll get injured, maybe he'll go off before the 60th minute ahead of a clean sheet. Something will happen, right? That's generally how people feel about him. If we try and look at it objectively, he is potentially a decent option moving forward, right? And I say the word potentially, that is key there, because so far he has started all 3 games. Maatsen hasn't come in. We know that Moreno has gone to Forest, and Luca Digne has played 73 minutes plus in each of the fixtures so far. And coming up, the fixtures are decent, right? Aston Villa is not necessarily an elite defence, but they've got the fixtures to pick up some clean sheets. Everton at home, Wolves at home, Ipswich away, Man United at home, Fulham away, Bournemouth at home. I think the home games in particular, outside of maybe Man United, all look pretty good. Ipswich away is not bad either. And then Fulham away, I wouldn't expect a clean sheet, but it's not terrible. So I think the fixtures look okay. The problem for me is we don't know what Aston Villa are going to be like around Champions League. We don't know how Unai Emery is going to manage players and rotation and stuff like that. So it might be that Luca Digne's first choice, he's only 4.5 million. That sounds great. But then he's probably more likely to play in the Champions League. And possibly Maatsen will then come in for some of the games in the Premier League. It's not a guarantee, but it's something that could happen. And I just don't know. Like, Luca Digne can be very attacking, right? Again, we need to put previous biases aside. He's already picked up an assist in the first 3 game weeks. If he continues getting minutes, the attacking returns will come. But I don't know if he's so good it's just worth that risk about possible rotation. And it's boring, but someone like Konza or Pau Torres, if you want to target these Aston Villa fixtures, is probably worth going for instead. And the thing with Aston Villa, I've said, like, Bournemouth at home is in game week 9. So you are getting a pretty good stretch of fixtures for quite a while. Even after that, okay, Spurs away, Liverpool away, you don't want to play a defender in those games, especially a 4.5 from Villa. But then Palace at home in 12 is okay. Brentford at home in 14 is okay. Southampton at home in 15 is okay. This is potentially, especially if you're wildcarding, a player you could put in for the long term. Can you guarantee that Luca Digne is going to be playing all those matches? I highly doubt it. And it's not, like, a 4.5 million defenders are not necessarily where you want to be spending your transfers. Maybe for someone like Rico Lewis, it's worth the punt because the upside is potentially massive. With Luca Digne, I'm just not sure it is. And I am trying to forget about everything that's happened in the past. I do think on paper there is potential there. But I just feel like at some point Maatsen's going to come in. And when that happens, it's just going to be a headache of who's going to start every week. And it could be that it continues to be Luca Digne and he's great. I'm just not sure it's worth that risk. So let's stick to cheap defenders and talk about Anthony Robinson next, who's had nearly 300,000 transfers in ahead of West Ham at home in game week 4. Now, he's a player I've got in my own squad, and I don't have any intentions to sell him until possibly on wildcard. So I think he's fine, but I don't think he's necessarily anything more than that. And I'm not sure he's as good an option for game week 4 onwards as the transfers suggest. Like, part of the reason I own him is because I got him for Leicester at home in game week 2 and Ipswich away in game week 3. And I was fortunate that I got an assist in both of those games. But I'm also conscious that Fulham didn't keep a clean sheet in any of the matches so far. And they're not a defence that I would rate that highly. And I look at the next 6 game weeks, and I'm not sure where the clean sheets are coming from. And it's fine when you get 2 assists every 3 games, but that's not going to continue. And I don't think Robinson's a terrible option. I put him in one of my wildcard drafts last week. He's nailed on. He gets into attacking positions. But I look at the next 6 game weeks. West Ham at home, Newcastle at home in 4 and 5. And I'm thinking like Kudus and Bowen and Gordon and Isak. I don't see clean sheets there. Then you got back-to-back away games. Forest and Man City, not going to be ideal. Villa at home, again, Watkins, Rodgers, Bailey if he's back fit. Not sure there's a clean sheet at home there either. And then Everton away in game week 9 is quite difficult as well. Like, if we look further than that, because obviously this is just a cheap option you could bench some weeks. Brentford at home in 10 is probably okay. Wolves at home is 12 is probably okay as well. I just think in the short term, like next 4 to 6 weeks, there's not a huge amount of clean sheets. If you want to put him in because he's nailed or you don't have to worry about rotation and stuff like that, I think it's fine. And they are capable of getting a clean sheet in 1 or 2 of these games, but I'm not sure I would put a huge amount of money on it, to be honest with you. And also, if I look at the predicted points on Fantasy Football Hub, again, just one of the many tools they have over there, links in the description below, as I said earlier. And I go to defenders for, let's just do, what game weeks did I have there? Game weeks 4 to 9. And we'll price it 4.6 and below, which is basically Robinson's price. I don't think he's that high up on the list. So first of all, it's 3 Villa defenders in the top 4. So Luca Dean, Pau Torres, then it's Dunk third and Konza fourth. Then even Coleman at Everton, although I'd probably rather go for Mikalenko. Then you got Brentford defenders, then Robinson. So he's ahead of Dan Burn and Van Heck, but 19.2 points. I just think Villa are better. Like I know we're only talking about a couple of points, but on a model like this over 6 games, it's quite a lot. So if you're looking between Robinson or a Villa defender, although the Villa defenders are more boring if you're going to go for Pau Torres or Konza, I just think they're better. So I've got Robinson. I'm fine with him, but I'm not expecting a huge amount of clean sheets coming up, and I just wonder if this is the right time to buy him. I don't think it is. Let's stick to defenders and talk about Pedro Porro next, who's had nearly 250,000 transfers out this week. Now, I suspect a lot of those transfers are from wildcarders, but when you look at the fixtures, it kind of makes sense. Like, there's not a massive amount of clean sheet opportunities for Spurs over the next 4 game weeks. It's Arsenal at home this week. Brentford at home in game week 5 isn't too bad, but I'm sure Mbeumo owners are more than happy to play him against that Spurs defence. Then you've got United away and then Brighton away in 6 and 7. So it doesn't look ideal. I think it's fine if you want to go without him in the short term. I will say, though, as a more long-term thinking option, I still think Porro is pretty great. Like at 5.5 million, he's cheaper than the likes of Gvardiol, Robertson, Van Dijk. He's absolutely nailed on, and he's one of the most attacking defenders in the league. You'd probably put Trent above him, but not too many other players. And I'll tell you now, as an owner that benched him against Newcastle in game week 3, it was not a fun game to watch. He had so many shots and could have come away with an attack and return. It's the kind of thing you can do. So even though I don't see many clean sheets, it's still going to be scary to watch him if you don't own him. I think it's reasonable to go without him, like I've said, but long term, I still like him. Like Brentford at home in 5 is fine. You've got West Ham at home in 8 is okay. Villa at home in 10, again, okay. Ipswich at home in 11 is pretty good. Fulham at home in 13 is decent enough. And some of these away games are okay too. Like Palace away, Bournemouth away, Southampton away. I'm not saying there's clean sheets in those matches, but there's potential there. Plus you've got the attacking returns on top. And he's a player that unless he gets injured, you just don't have to worry about for starts. And that is valuable in FPL, especially when you're a bit cheaper than some of those 6 million defenders. So I think if I wildcard in 6, there's a good chance that I would just keep Porro. Because after United away and Brighton away, they've got 3 home games in 4, West Ham, Villa and Ipswich, and then Palace away. And I look ahead to that Fulham game in 13. I think that's fine. And I don't really need to think any further than that because so much will have changed by that point. So if I was wildcarding in game week 4, I wouldn't go out of my way to include him, but I don't think he's a bad option. And then game week 6 wildcard onwards, I think Porro will be in most of them. So I think he's still a good long-term option, but short-term we should probably expect a little bit of a reduction in his points output. So Danny Welbeck is proving popular again. Over 400,000 transfers in so far this week. He's had 3 attacking returns in the first 3 game weeks. He did blank against Arsenal away in game week 3, but fair enough, right? Lots of attackers blank against that Arsenal defence. Now, I've said many times this season, I prefer João Pedro as the longer term option, and that is still true because I think, and look, I might regret saying this, but I think João Pedro is a little bit more nailed on than people are giving him credit for. Brighton do have a ton of options. They could set up with something like Welbeck or Ferguson as the 9 and then Rutter as the 10, for example. But I think João Pedro will just be first choice number 10. And if someone else is going to play that role, I think he'll just play number 9 instead. So I think nailed on is maybe a bit too far, but I think his minutes are much more secure than Welbeck's are in that Brighton team. But as a short-term option for 4 and 5, I really like Welbeck. João Pedro is currently away on international duty with Brazil. Their final game of this break is played on Wednesday morning UK time. I think it's like 1:30. So he's not going to be back in Brighton training until like Thursday or Friday at the earliest. And obviously they then play on Saturday, so it's a quick turnaround. Now, for what it's worth, and the minutes that João Pedro is going to get in that Brazil team, I think he'll still play and start for Brighton, but his minutes might be a bit more reduced than what we've seen so far. So as the shorter term punt for 4 and 5, playing as the 9, I like Welbeck. I wouldn't want to rely on him much longer than that. I think when Ferguson is fit, he could come in. The fixtures also get tougher from 6 onwards. They've got Chelsea away, Spurs at home and Newcastle away. So maybe you'd want to reduce the amount of Brighton players you have anyway. But 4 and 5 ahead of maybe wildcarding in 6, I quite like that. Now, I've got João Pedro in my team already. If I had 2 free transfers this week, I would consider Saka and Isak to Welbeck and Salah and just double up on the Brighton attack. It might not go well, but they've got the fixtures to do it, knowing that I would then wildcard in game week 6. So short summary, I still think João Pedro on penalties and better minutes long term is the better pick than Welbeck, but I don't mind Welbeck for a 2-week punt and then look to get rid of him after that. So lots of defenders in this video. Let's talk about Josko Gvardiol next. Just over 300,000 transfers out this week. Now, if you're on wildcard, I get it, because a lot of you will be trying to put in Haaland and Salah and Trent and Robertson, and you probably don't have the space or the budget to fit Gvardiol in as well. And at 6 million, I don't think that's too expensive for what he can deliver. And I think over the season, that'll be a perfectly reasonable price. But with the FPL landscape right now, it does feel a bit expensive, especially when Rico Lewis is continuing to play. So I wouldn't include Gvardiol on wildcard. If, a bit like how I spoke with Saka and Isak earlier, you're making a 2 transfer move where you're selling Gvardiol to get funds for another one, fair enough. If it's a single transfer move, look, maybe to get Trent in, fair enough. Possibly even Robertson as well, because the next 4 fixtures are pretty good for Liverpool. But I think for most people, you're probably just better off holding him for Brentford at home. Like, it's still a good fixture. And you might not want him for Arsenal at home and Newcastle away in 5 or 6, but you can make that transfer next week instead if you want to. Longer term, I actually like game week 7 to 9 for City. They've got Fulham at home, Wolves away, Southampton at home. But in the short term, next 3, it probably is only that Brentford game in game week 4. But I think you could keep hold of him for that. Is it frustrating that Rico Lewis is out there for much cheaper, playing very attacking? Of course. But if you've already got him, your decision moving forward is a little bit different to someone that is wildcarding. So I'd probably look to keep hold of him for game week 4 and then reassess after that. Let me know what you're thinking about doing with Gvardiol. Who are you transferring in or out of your teams this week in the comments below? If you've enjoyed that video, give it a like and hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to check out Fantasy Football Hub. Links in the description below. As I said earlier, you can sign up yearly and get 50% off at the moment, or you can just try it out for a month and see how you feel. There's lots of tools over there to help you do better at FPL, so I would definitely check that out. Otherwise, I'll catch you again tomorrow.